yeah, we're making puppets, but it's also, I call it shadow theater.
Basically, it's just a very magical, very enchanting kind of art form.
I get to make the puppets. I was not aware how is that gonna work, but when he showed me how the object is projected by the light and how the screen will take it, that was kind of a magic moment.
Like a magic trick. It's an illusion. There's a technical sleight of hand, right, that produces this moment of awe.
It's just so different from regular theater, so I really like it. I mean, mind blown, right?
And you're like, how do they do that? You know, behind the screen, which you can't see, is an array of lights and boards and musicians and puppeteers and hundreds sometimes of puppets that are really just cardboard and scotch tape and string and sticks.
We're using all kinds of things like mirrors and paper, and I mean, it's hard. It's a lot of work, and the detail is important.
You do everything. You make the puppets, you do the building of the screen, and you do the backdrops, you do the movement of the puppets, and you act in it. You can do the voices.
And I also love the opportunity to work with Larry Reed.
Profile is what's powerful in shadow. And it started by putting a nose on the side of my face, and then I realized that from this little nose, I built a whole mask out, and then I realized I could only turn in one direction unless I had two faces to the mask.
But once you start projecting these images, that's where the illusion comes in, and you add live music to it, and you have real people with puppets all on the same screen.
Well, there's something really basic about a shadow. Everybody has one, but nobody really pays attention to it. And we look very carefully at it.
The community is coming together outside in a park, and that is really a sort of more traditional way of doing it.
That is unusual. It's not like a movie. It's not like a cartoon. And it has a power, I think, that's different than all those other forms of expression. And to me, it's closer to wherever dreams come from.
The ideas that are presented are fresh, not necessarily new because they've been around.
My role in Sonoran Shadows was to adapt Patricia Preciado Martin's El Milagro and Other Stories.
I am teaching people through my books to honor our culture and our ancestors.
She basically talked about the old traditions, Sonora Desert, Sonora, Mexico, and Sonora Asa Desert, Arizona, in the 50s, and how people carry from Mexico, especially the tradition with them, just move here. And there were some families that didn't even move. They had the border moved.
Since it was Mexico, and since it was native land, like there's a continuing history of people that have always been here and continue to be here, and that have built this place.
Whatever I knew about Tucsonenses and Sonoran culture, I really learned reading these stories.
I really love the way that Patricia expressed like mijita and la nana and all the old, even some words that in Spanish that not a lot of people use it.
Los bukis. That's a very, I think, Tucsonense way of saying the kids. The neighborhood kids, you know? And in La Toreadora, I'm like, oh my God, I was one of those kids, you know? In El Salvador, in the Bay Area.
There's a saying in Spanish, el que vive en la memoria nunca muere. He who lives in our memory never dies. You know, they have destroyed a lot of our architecture, our buildings. But this is one thing that lives. And the only way it's going to live if people keep telling the stories.
And the story is called La Toreadora. And it involves the 8 kids. And La Granda is the grandmother. And she comes out and she goes to the chicken coop. And she reaches in and grabs the fattest one.
Both Cristina and I, when we were trying to decide which stories, I was like La Bailarina, and she was like, she had a gut reaction to it too. Because we still encounter little girl, like even high school kids that want to be in the arts, and their parents are too busy working too many jobs, or, you know, don't really have the money. There's a lot of people like me that feel the way that I do, especially women, that we just don't really see our true stories reflected.
Speaking like for myself, I hadn't heard of it, and I'm Mexican, and this is kind of Mexican.
The oral histories, my short stories are political.
In southern Arizona and Arizona in general, I mean, you know, as ground zero, or people call it here brown zero, for all sort of things politics.
What is political is what changes people's minds about things.
Having to do with migrants and Latinos and people of color in this country, right? And getting that narrative, that alternate narrative, that unheard narrative.
And social issues, and helps people understand diversity and racism.
People from Tucson, and not just people, the new generations, kids, families, and grandparents, they get recognized and they get to pass the word like this: we were here before, and this is the way that we will live.
I think it makes people feel good. I think it's going to make Patricia Preciado Martin feel really good to see her stories, you know, told in this grand scale. And I think everybody that remembers Tucson in the 60s and 50s is going to feel really good.
It doesn't stop with my generation.